Hi, everyone. Nick Jenkinson. So until recently, I headed up procurement real estate for Astellas, who are a Japanese pharma organization. In my presentation now, obviously risk has been a key issue for everybody this year in this very strange world that we've been living in. So I'm going to take you through some of the journey we've been through from a risk management perspective, and also linking it into how do we start to preempt the unknown unknowns for the future. So I will now start. So Astellas, I'm sure many of you haven't heard of Astellas. So we're a fairly sizable, so sort of top 20 global pharma organization, Japanese headquartered, with key regions within Japan, North America, and EMEA. As you can see from the figures there, about 17,000-ish people. And from a procurement point of view, about $3.6, $3.7 billion of spend, and have a number of different therapeutic areas that we focus on. And my role was really the EMEA side of the business, so very much focused on procurement and real estate across quite a lot of complexity and a lot of risk across all of our European business. So as you can see, there's 23 sales affiliates, about 35-ish countries that covers. So moving on to the topic of risk. So I think from a digital point of view, this image depicts how many people I see within procurement are very much looking at the new, looking at the bright and shiny, but trying to pull that together in some sort of plan and digital strategy can be a challenge. And I think when you look specifically at risk, that actually becomes even more complex. So there are obviously lots of different risk domains, lots of complexity. As I touched on earlier, the kind of unknown unknowns. I think the world that we have experienced this year is far different than any of us would have ever anticipated. And you've done a fantastic job if anyone had preempted this as part of their risk strategy. But I think what I'll go on to is really having that foundation and having a core approach means that you can scale things far quicker and far easier once the major crisis does happen. And so I think, as I've just touched upon, having a clear roadmap and having a directional strategy of what it is we're trying to achieve, and having risk as a core part of that digital strategy that you're laying out, I think is one of the key pillars, and building on that foundation so that you're able to adapt much quicker. So from our point of view, if I just sort of take you through what we have been through within Astellas. So I joined late 2015, kind of have been through various iterations of change. So if we start really Jan 16, very much focused around the initial strategy in terms of what is the art of the possible, getting people on board with that strategy, adapting that then into terms of creating the team, creating the source to contract foundation. So we as you can see from March 17, had in place an end-to-end source to contract platform, very creatively called My Contract and My Buy. So gave us that strong foundation where we've got the business bought in from a strategy point of view. We had built a strong focus on people within the team, and then we're starting to put the right foundations in place from a source to contract perspective. What we also did as part of that, if you can see around Jan 18, was put the delivery center in place. So actually had an engine to make all of this run, but then also risk, and I'll go on to this in a lot more detail, but we implemented a tool which, again, very creatively, we called My Supplier Risk, and really has built our risk foundation, obviously way before COVID was thought about, because obviously we had our own burning platform that drove this activity, but it's helped us then to be able to build on that strong foundation. And then really over the latter period, it's really been focused then about how do we improve that, how do we stabilize it, our next iteration of source to contract, so actually improvements, because when we looked at probably what we had put in place, as many people do, it's often procurement tools for procurement people, and really we wanted to focus more on the business. So more recent times very much focused on supplier collaboration, supplier innovation, and how do we really enable that within the business. So then moving back onto the topic of risk. So as obviously many people have experienced this year, this was kind of us as we were going along. We were in the middle of our transformation, and then we had a major regulatory issue which kind of hit us like an explosion. And as I said, this was obviously our burning platform at the time, but everybody, I'm sure, can understand this feeling and understand what it led to, which was very much around uncertainty, confused about how do we manage this. It was very much debilitating for our business at the time, which again, very much similar to, I'm sure many of you have experienced this year. So what we did is we looked at looking at a holistic approach to risk, with putting our source to contract process in the middle, and then really having this triangle that you can see here. So within our team and within my team, very much setting the direction for the operating model, driving the strategy, choosing external partners, risk ownership actually always sat within our business. So we have defined risk experts within our organization, depending on the type of risk domain. From a technology point of view, we needed something to quickly enable this. So actually, in order to automate processes, in order to ensure everything was integrated. So as I said, we had My Supplier Risk, initially focused within Europe, but then went live in the US as well, implemented in various languages, and had an architecture where we could easily integrate with other tools, which again, I will go on to, which has again helped how we've been able to scale that. And then also talking about the delivery center that I mentioned, we have an engine to make it run. So very much focused on ensuring that we are enabling the business, that we are moving through whatever diligence processes are required as quickly, as effectively, and as efficiently as possible. So within this holistic approach, I think I broke it down here into four main items. And I think if linking these into the sort of post-COVID world and future unknowns that we might experience, I think this has really helped us. And obviously, even though I touched on earlier about having a clear roadmap, if I'm honest, risk wasn't always number one in our roadmap at the time. Our roadmap had to take a slightly different course because we had that burning platform. And I think that's an opportunity many people have this year. I think if everybody's honest and everybody's open and went back to their business probably a year and a half ago and tried to get investment for risk tools, it's maybe not always the easiest thing, because until you have experienced a significant challenge, it's not always the main focus of the business. So I think the opportunity that has now been brought is it's very much front of mind with senior execs within the business, and therefore taking a step back and thinking about how do I use this opportunity. And I think these are some of the critical items. So I think this integration into our end-to-end process was kind of absolutely critical, not only in terms of part of the source to contract cycle, but also we actually manage risk at an engagement by engagement level. So it's not the kind of old fashioned diligence process where we do it once and then forget about it for 2 years and go back in the future. This is an ongoing iterative process. Every time we have an engagement with a supplier, we're using the taxonomy within our that's built into our source to contract process and certain contractual triggers in order to look at what is the risk of this activity and what do we need to do to ensure that we are managing that risk. I think also, again, building on how do we sort of focus on some of those unknown unknowns, it made us take a step back on what are the inherent risks of our organization. And we looked at 9 different risk domains. Depending what industries, that will obviously change, and different industries will have different challenges. But from a pharmaceutical perspective and from an Astellas perspective, we looked at 9 different risk domains, and each one of those is then integrated as in point 1 to look at. And that's a constant process where we're looking at our new risks coming into it. And so as we've scaled from a technological and from a geographical perspective, we have continued to look at, are these the right risk domains? Are we managing the right things? And it really has put a different approach and a different focus, which again was very much helpful in the last 12 months, because we were able to scale things quicker and easier than had we have not put this foundation in place. I think keeping it simple. So, I mean, any digital approach really has to focus on that user, and we've been very much focused on automating as much as possible. So from a user perspective, the touch points are very low. We've automated as much as we possibly could. The implementation of our delivery center support model also then created the engine so that if there are challenges, we can move those through as quickly and as effectively as possible, which has enhanced our adoption. And as I just touched on, the final part was automating as many process steps as possible. So again, focusing on that end user, focusing on what is important to us, what are the risks that are important for us, and also integrating with external data sources. So from a big data perspective, looking about how we can enrich that data set. So which going on to here, so we were able to integrate simply and easily, which again, taking into account what we've experienced over the last 12 months, means that we've been able to scale at a much quicker rate. So we have a tool that uses automation, machine learning, and natural language processing to really look at specific areas of interest for our business. Also goes through a level of eyeballs, if you like, to make sure that this is truly the risk, but it's pulling data that is available in the public domain, focusing on the specific risks that we have, and actually trying to give us that information on a continuous daily basis so that we can, again, really have a risk process which is adding value and is focused on the specific challenges that we're facing, as opposed to just a due diligence process that ticked to the box. And then this piece here, so talking about the touch points and the automations, we've been very, very focused on cycle time within our risk process as well. I think we need to be, risk is obviously absolutely critical, but we also needed to ensure that our business experience was a positive one. So we've been very focused on the cycle time to ensure that we have a thorough process, which, as you can see here, is about 8.5 days end to end in the US and just under 13 days in Europe. So it's been a fairly rapid process. As a result, from a user point of view, it's been a good experience. Adoption has been positive, but really put risk at as a focal point within our organization. So just in terms of just closing out then, so I think some of the key factors really to think about how do we start to preempt what the future will look like, and how can we be ahead of the curve. As I said, clearly no one could have predicted what we have experienced over the last 12 months. But I think the key is having that strong foundation. I used an analogy previously of building a house, and I think anyone who has been through a major house project will see that it's a lot easier to build and extend as opposed to keep building on new foundation. And I think by having that strong foundation where it's integrated into your source to contract processes, keeping things simple. So actually, let's not try and overcomplicate. Let's very much, for many organizations, walk before we can run, because I think probably everybody or lots of organizations will recognize that some of their risk processes have been called into question over the last 12 months. So very much focused on keeping it as simple as possible. From a technology perspective, we are in the strongest place that we have ever been in terms of the tools, the technologies that are available. We're at a real tipping point in terms of what automation can bring us, how that can become scalable. So again, making sure that the technology is used in the best way possible, and that again, coming back to the simplicity, that from an automation point of view, we automate whatever possible. Look at best of breed. So actually, I didn't touch on it, but even though we're fully integrated into our source to contract process, we didn't actually use the same tool as we have for our other source to contract processes. So we were able to integrate it from a process point of view, but we chose what we felt was the best tools available, because now we've integrated a number of tools in. And then finally, really just having that effective change management training, really focusing on risk is a critical element. I think, as I said, from an opportunity perspective, it's very much at the forefront of people's minds. And actually, what is the next COVID? What is going to be the future challenges that we're going to face over the next 12 months, 24 months? From a procurement point of view, being able to have that foundation in place where we are able to react much simpler, much quicker than what has been the experience over recent times, I think there's a massive opportunity there. And then that's it. So thank you very much for your time. And if there are any questions, please let me know. Thank you.